Hello and welcome. Well, terrorism getting closer to Ghana, and that's the subject on the table today. Mali had its fair share, Burkina Faso, now Ivory Coast. But you know, Ghana has been one of the most fortunate countries. Everything seems to descend down and then dance around us and go away. Ebola came down, civil strifes have come down and seem to dance around us and go away. Are we going to be that fortunate with regards to terrorism? Well, I don't know about that yet. Another question everybody's asking is, are men on the ground fit for any attack? If there's an attack, will the soldiers and the policemen be up to scratch? That's one side. You and I, what happens if you are in a hotel, minding your own business and something like that happened? What do? Do you suddenly recall any word in Arabic and recite it and hope to God that, it saves you your life? But that's how serious this thing is. Are we equipped enough for terrorism? Are we vigilant enough to even spot signs and report it? Now, recently we hear this guy was in and out of the country for so many times, even though he was on the wanted list worldwide. Terrorism is coming closer to Ghana. My name is Anan Sakwao. This is PM Express, and when I come back, we're talking security, what you and I should do, what the security should do, and how it is that we can stop it from coming here if we can. Let's go. Well, thank you very much for staying, and we are discussing the issue of terrorism, looming closer to home, not too close for comfort. Mali's got his fair share, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast. Is it going to be Togo and then they shape off, or they're going to come through our country? What signs do we look out for? When it happens, what do we do? Are the police, the army equipped in case anything like that happens? What should we do or not do as a country so that you don't invite these things? I mean, what did Ivory Coast do anyway? I don't know. But I'm one gentleman in the studio who may have the answers. I'm talking to Ibad Ibrahim, who's concerned himself with international matters and security. Ibad, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
But I cannot start this discussion unless I saw an article today, going all over about saying I lied about that Nanado saga, and I looked at it, and I have a lot of respect for you, so I read the article, and so I need to confirm with you, even though the story doesn't say that, but the headline is a bit alarming. And what's the issue with this before we go
on? Nana, stuff happens, and normally you remember during the George Walker Bush administration, they first had an intelligence that Saddam Hussein had got weapons of mass destruction. They acted on that and then invaded Iraq in 2003. After the war, they realized that initial intelligence was wrong. This is a government, and the world's topmost government. I am an individual. I have links with our national security to some extent. I have international partners as well. So the initial briefing I had indicated there was a certain timeline regarding a pre-notice that was given to Nana Addo Akufo-Addo. But someone who was directly involved in the negotiations at some point, he's not a Ghanaian, he has told me the settlement timeline was erroneous. So therefore, I think humility and modesty demanded that I should come out and correct that wrong. So I apologize from the bottom of my heart. There was a gap in the intelligence I had initially before the second one. So whoever has been hurt, I'm sorry about it.
Okay. That's that. The other thing is terrorism. And this is not the first time you've been in studio that we're discussing the issue of terrorism. Now, we as Ghanaians, we're very relaxed. Maybe because we haven't been attacked or been through a war, security is not on our priority list. Is this something that these countries are doing that are inviting the terrorism, or are these terrorists just take a dart, throw it in the West African map, it lands in Mali, say, well, that's it, we are attacking? How do they pick and choose the country?
Nana, I think the priority of every president is to keep your people safe. So therefore, a lot could be happening behind the scenes we do not know about. So Ghana is taking security quite seriously. The sovereignty of every country is determined by how secure you are. But is it enough? That is a question we need to ask. Look at the way they cherry-picked Mali, Burkina, Ivory Coast. One common denominator is that all these are Francophone countries. And everybody knows the French have a lot of traction in their former colonies than the Brits do in the case of Commonwealth nations. So therefore, I think the targets of those attacks were not necessarily Malians or Burkinabés or Ivorians. AQIM, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, which has got other groups like Ansar-Din and a host of others, has realized that if they can't meet the French soldiers boot for boot in the desert, then they could as well attack soft targets like hotels. So therefore, Ghana is not a Francophone country. We don't take orders from France. We aren't participating in France's aggressive Operation Barkhane, which is taking place within the Sahel and the larger North African region currently. There isn't a single Ghanaian soldier contributing to that effort, but there are Ivorians helping in various capacities. There are Malians and Burkinabés helping. So I think this was a ricochet, a natural reaction to France's aggressive and bellicose policies in the Sahel. So therefore, they intended to attack French nationals, but Ivorians, Malians, and Burkinabés were caught in the crossfire. So for as long as I believe, Nana, we don't contribute militarily to any belligerent foreign policy against AQIM, Boko Haram, and Ansar-Din, I think Ghana will be okay. But we need to take precautions because all other neighboring nations have been attacked except Togo.
So I was just going to ask, I mean, Togo is also French-speaking. Are they up next? Should they be, increasing their security to red alert?
I think this is an evolving threat. Before, they weren't adopting such attacks. The closest they came to this was attacking a gas facility in Algeria in a town called Inaminas. But Nana, they've realized this makes much more impact in the eyes of the international community. They go to a beach and spray people with bullets. And it has proven quite effective, quite unfortunately, because Nana, you don't need a squadron. 3, 4 dedicated young men that are ready to die. And if they come into Ghana, they will cross the border as civilians. They don't even need to come with an AK. That is why wherever there has been an attack, we've said there have been sleeper cells. There has been a certain support system so that they would purchase the weapons and choose which hotel to attack. So for me, we can't sit aloof and say this is a Francophone problem, or it's a problem for Francophone West Africa. For as long as we are just like Yaya Jammeh's the Gambia, we aren't on the radar of such groups. We need to take the needed precautions. But, as is always been the case, I think Ghanaians should not panic. I have done strings of interviews today, and someone asked me whether now we feel safe to go to the mall. So I said, terrorism is about intimidating people. If the first shot hasn't been fired and you are intimidated already, then you've lost to the terrorists. Don't allow them to change your course of life. Don't allow them to change your lifestyle. I think we should just continue to live normally, reposing enough confidence that our security agencies can deal with some of these situations.
The other thing is, how do you spot or become alert or look out for terrorism activities?
Nana, as soon as you deploy into such theaters of warfare, then stand ready for an attack. Al-Shabaab killed Prof. Awono because Uhuru Kenyatta's Kenya, I say this with tongue-in-cheek, Uhuru Kenyatta, the dual president of Kenya and the Republic of Ghana, his KDF, Kenyan Defense Forces were deployed in their thousands in the Linda Inchi operation in Somalia. They dislodged Al-Shabaab from Kismayo, Baidoa, and other strategic towns. So they had to head back, and we've seen an astronomical uptick in the resurgence of Al-Shabaab. And a month ago, they killed well over 100 Kenyan soldiers. So what happens? You smash terrorist infrastructure, you decimate them, 2-3 years down the line, there is a resurgence. I think the methodology is flawed. For us to have an antidote to this, I think we should go for the battle for hearts and minds rather than going about killing people and thinking that by killing Osama bin Laden, that means the head of the Al-Qaeda snake has been cut off. They always replenish their dissipated ranks. And that is what has been proven since 9/11. So there needs to be a change. Whatever change there needs to be, the international community needs to start thinking about it.
Let me go on the phone and speak to Dr. Vladimir Entry Danso, who normally would have been here, but we excuse him today. Hello, Doc.
Hello, Nana.
Good evening.
Good evening, Nana.
Doc, we are looking at terrorism dancing around our country, Mali, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso. I'm speaking to Ibad Ibrahim in the studio.
And
he seems to think that I think the French has been a bit heavy-handed on some Islamic groups, and therefore these countries are being chosen because they are soft targets. You can't go and attack the French, boot for boot. So they're choosing this as a soft target. I mean, do you share the same view, or you have a different view to that?
Oh, certainly. Terrorism is always looking at soft targets. Actually, that is the definition of it. Using illegal force against non-combatants, the application of which is designed to settle some ideological or political or religious scores. So that's exactly what they're doing. The French has gotten one of the heaviest bases here in Africa, in not Djibouti as people think, but in Mali. And that is what they're using in making sure that Akim and Al-Sadin and others don't operate properly. In fact, the intervention in Mali was the beginning of the hatred towards France. And again, you would realize that but for the French intervention, the intention of creating some kind of new country called Azawad, using the whatever they got from the fall of Gaddafi, would have been realized. And so we knew, and I personally knew, that once the French intervened, they were going to turn their attention on France, attack French installations, French citizens, and anything, anywhere they would meet French people. So if you look at the nature of the attacks, you would realize that they attacked where they felt that French citizens would be present. So all the three attacks, I believe, are a kind of revenge to the French for the intervention in Mali.
But Doc, let me find out, why has terrorism become so appetizing? I mean, this is the time where the world has got more money, more food, more luxury. The life has never been easier. I mean, we even have Google, we carry internet along. So, I mean, why do we still have, young men who are blessed with all this new world, ready to die and kill people? What's making it so attractive?
Well, terrorism is very attractive because of the way we have caused it to be created. I'll first and foremost blame the non-system in which we are. There's no system now, no predictable system. At least the Cold War international system was very predictable, and we knew what would happen. The fall of communism and the end of the Cold War created a vacuum, and that is the vacuum being filled by terrorism. And it is also because after the fall of communism, the West thought that it was time for a kind of triumph. Neoliberalism has triumphed. If you read the works of Fukuyama, Nyai, McNamara, and others soon after the fall of communism, you realize that the West thought that was the end of history and that neoliberalism must function. And as a result, you had America trying to lead a Pax Americana kind of thing. And that was thought about a clash of civilizations. Americans' interest, especially in ensuring that their values and Western values spread throughout the world. With Bush saying that he was going to make Iraq the beacon of civilization, the beacon of liberalism, and therefore you went after Saddam Hussein. All these things are brought about what we call the clash of civilizations, and that those values stand in marked offensive contrast to the values of some civilizations, like the Islamic civilization. And definitely the odd ones among them, among the Muslim community, would want to point at this and start their own thing. And that's why it is festering. Secondly, the injustice brought about by the same globalization that you're talking about is also grounds for festering terrorism. And finally, again, going back to the value system, you would realize that the West, again, is trying to make it believe as if if you are not with me, then you are an enemy.
Yeah.
So the fight against terrorism is that when we have created it, the fight against terrorism itself is creating more terrorism. These are the things I can see making terrorism fester.
Let me, Doc, let me read a message that I got from one of our viewers, and then it says, Nana, please send your team to Osei Kojokrom in the Bia West district to see how our borders are left unguarded. There are no soldiers to guard our borders. Only SEPs and immigration officers are there. Come and see lineup of Ivorian soldiers and policemen at the border. They are serious about their security. You know, seriousness about security. And I know, Doc, you've complained, or you know, you've alerted us so many times that we are very, very lax when it comes to security. Now, even those who've lined up their borders with soldiers and everything are having challenges. So, I mean, what's then going to happen to us?
The point is that even though I've always been talking about the laxity in security, fighting terrorism does not need the forward presence of men and women of the armed forces. No. I mean, terrorism fosters not when you have lined up security gadgets and institutions and whatever it is. Other than that, America would have been very impregnable. The point is this, that the man who is talking about Osei Kojokrom or Kofi Krom or whoever it is in those areas he's talking about, how is he aware even about what is terrorism? You see, mainstreaming terrorism in our daily lives, daily mundane lives, when we are able to identify things that are untoward, things that are not necessarily part of our making of our everyday political, social, and economic life. That is the most important thing in fighting terrorism. We are just very loose. The whole society's security is more on regime security. And that's very, very unfortunate. The best security is when your citizens are very savvy about their surroundings and are able to report to institutions that are built to keep our security. So I'm not for manning our borders. No terrorist is going to come through the borderlines. No. Okay. They are not coming through there. When they are doing their money laundering, gun running, and what all forms of trafficking, they are not going to come through your borders. They are using more sophisticated equipment, ICT, and whatever it is to do what they want to do. So I'm saying we are loose because we are unable to make the Ghanaian aware of terrorism or aware of security. So now let me give you an example I've always been citing.
Sure.
You and I come from an area which is part of the center of gravity of Ghana. I'm talking about the Akosombo Dam.
Yeah.
If I should drop a bomb, a small bomb, to break the Akosombo Dam right now, Ghana has lost and lost a lot.
Oh, crowd
and we have a garrison over there. We don't have a garrison.
No.
And now the situation there is so lax that you could drive all the way to the Akosombo Dam itself. Nobody's asking any question. Of course, some security checks. What about Pound Dam? It's even a thoroughfare. You drive now across the dam.
Yeah.
Now, when terrorists see these laxities and they are against Ghana, for example, this will be the target. So it's not the lining up of soldiers alone, but the awareness that if Ghana, this is what we do. How can I identify a certain car who wants to drive across the Pound Dam, for example, and I say, hey, no, this is something unto this is something odd. How can I identify an oddity as we drive along the pond down and things like that? These are some of the things I've been talking about. How do children know the difference between a candy lying on the ground and a candy that is flaking, or pen, or anything? Those mundane things that can spark off some kind of what we have Westfield Mall, we have this mall, that mall. As you enter and you're moving around, how do you see security in place? These are some of the things, but not the marshalling of gendarmes.
Doc, let me take a quick pause here. Definitely come back to you, and then when I come back, I just want to find out: is it that we've just enjoyed peace so much that's brewed this culture of security and family? I mean, you know, where do we get this attitude from? While others get so paranoid, and I mean, I traveled through an Italian immigration once, and I vowed not to go there again. We're coming straight back. Well, thank you very much for staying, and we're discussing a very, very important issue. That's safety, terrorism. Don't even know if I say a new wave where, you know, young people now find it so attractive. I mean, to the point where people actually leave their luxury in their East London home and smuggle themselves up somewhere to go and blow themselves up. And that's worrying. And now it's getting closer to home, to West Africa. Normally, we down here, you know, we didn't used to, I mean, it's new to us. But narrow it down to Ghana. I mean, why are we so, I mean, is it just because we've enjoyed peace for a long time? Where do we get our laxed?
No, in the past 3 years, we've discussed terrorism as a problem for so long. I think the time has come for us to be looking at possible solutions. And when I say solutions, Nana, not cosmetic ones. Earlier today, Doc was making a point that terrorism is a problem of the 21st century. When we co-spoke at Legon today to give guidance to people on taking career paths in international relations and security. And I agree with Doc. Doc mentioned that in the 80s, 60s, 70s, there was a clash of civilizations between the East and the West. That's precipitated the Cold War. If the USSR could have an entirely political model and coexist, albeit with mutual sabotage, with the capitalism of the West, Nana, hasn't it come a time where we discuss whether political Islam can coexist with modern democracy? John Garang of South Sudan exuded or militarily expressed the aspirations of his people. But when independence beaconed, they laid down their arms. Dr. Nkrumah was quite feisty in his pursuit of independence for us. When independence came nigh, he stopped using arms. So has the world questioned itself for even a moment? Have any of these actors, whether in Algeria or Afghanistan, ever been given the opportunity to operate as political actors without interference from the international community? Ghanaians will stand up to Togo and fight back in case they want to tamper with the way we live. But as soon as the burden of war is allayed, then you find out the quality of life, the cultural, beauty of the life we want to live. So has anybody questioned how the world will look like under a pristine caliphate where all the rules will come from the Quran? Nobody has ever thought of that. All that we know is they want to form an Islamic state. They want to form a caliphate. Let's go smash them. And therefore, if we don't calibrate the way we look at these things, the Vatican is existing as a Catholic state. And the world has no problem with that. You saw how violent Pope Urban I was when they fought the Crusades. But when war was no longer there, you saw the beauty of Catholicism and how it spread across the world. So can the world give political Islam a chance to exist without any interference from the West for even 6 months? For us to see whether the wanton corruption we see, the sheer preponderance of neglect for the poor we see in the current capitalist system will be formed. A precursor to Al-Shabaab, and that is not to justify the activities of such groups. A precursor to Al-Shabaab was the Union of Islamic Courts. It operated as a government, and during that time, in the mid-2000s, piracy was a huge problem in the Horn of Africa. But when they brought to bear instructions from political Islam and the governance system, it's reduced to the barest minimum. So therefore, maybe it may not work now after 3 decades or 4 decades or 5 decades of fighting without getting anywhere. At some point, the world will have to realize that Buddhists should be able to establish a Buddhist state and be okay and should be able to live in peace with other people. Let's also try an Islamic state, different from what ISIS preaches anyway.
As much as I buy, I want to agree with you. I think Islam hasn't done good PR for itself. So let's say I do something which is against Islam. Instead of them sending Ibad to me to say, look, Nana, in 1645 or in 1400, A, B, C, D happened. And therefore, we came to an agreement that henceforth, we're not going to paint bottle tops red again. Ah, okay, I understand. But no, I'll be sat at home and all of a sudden, smash, 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 shoot, shoot, shoot. So the next day, they were thinking, Ibad is unreasonable. Nana just complained about the red top and he smashed it. So in that case, I'm going to complain about every red top.
Exactly.
And I think that's where...
Nana, have people taken time to look at what happened in the golden age of Islam when Europe was living in wilderness, and when Europe did not know science? What system existed in those times? All the things you read about Western exploits in terms of education and giant strides in discoveries all came after the 10th century. What happened between the 7th and the 10th century? There was mammoth development in the Middle East. So can we go back to that system? It's possible, but we need to understand it within the context of modernity, so that the beheadings, the amputation of arms will all not be parts. And we see how, look, corruption is a big problem. Nana, Islam says there are 2 types of theft. There is the theft of convenience and the theft of need. If I came to Idumasa, I went into a cocoa farm and took a fruit and then ate, you wouldn't chop off my hand. But if some minister sitting in Accra, despite the hardship in the villages, stashes away 1 million Ghana cedis in a Swiss bank, and we catch such a person, do you think we should dilly-dally about this? There needs to be something stringent and draconian to deter crime. And this is what political Islam, I believe, if well adopted into the current modern system, will bring to the world.
You see, I'm going back to my question. I think Islam is suffering the same fate that we traditions and chiefs are suffering. Let me go to Doc with the same question. Hello, Doc.
Hello, Nana.
Ibad has raised a very, very, important or salient point here with regards to that. Look, why doesn't the world give the Islam world a chance so that if an Islam state wants to be formed, why? Of course, there's the Vatican, and they are living peacefully, and we actually travel to go and see, and there are people who are not even Catholics and just go and witness all the ceremonies that goes on well. But my point I was raising was that Islam was suffering the same thing that we chiefs are suffering, that we haven't done enough good PR for ourselves. So people outside of the fraternity just totally condemn you, and they're not ready to welcome you, let alone form a fraternity. Because I've been calling for a national day for traditionalist day, but I'm not going to have it today, unless I fight a bit more to get a traditionalist day in Ghana. We have Valentine's Day and all that, but not a traditionalist day. I mean, so I agree with my brother that, look, give the Islam world a chance to, pray from their Quran, but with the PR, is it possible?
It's not going to be possible. I mean, the world has not been static. If you look at the development of Islam, there has been the golden age. I agree with him. But what is happening, well, even with chieftaincy, is that there is a huge interference in the way would have developed if there were not that interference. You understand? Right now, chieftaincy in Ghana is politicized to the hilt. It's politicized to the extent that people can even buy their way and take the stool and then just serve the government. And there are about 74 hotspots in Ghana, chieftaincy problems. And there is not a single one where the long arm of politics is not seen. It is the same thing happening to Islam. Islam has not been allowed yet to develop its own negatives and positives, out of which contradictions you would have had some purity. They've not been allowed. But I don't subscribe to the idea that creating a certain caliphate would solve the problem like, say, the Vatican. The Vatican is the remnant, a relic of all the struggles that Christianity has seen. And it has no value or power anymore apart from looking at satellite congregations throughout the world. What I suspect is that the mistakes we committed in the past are now coming to fruition, and we are seeing them. Look at the Sykes-Picot Agreement after the First World War. The map you see today in the Middle East was created after the First World War. And the Kurds have been distributed among 4 countries: Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. And in each of these countries, they are being suppressed. They are not Arabs, but they are being Arabized. Fortunately, they have one religion. But then some of them are Christians, Druze. We have a motley of ethnic religious groups in the Middle East. They have not been allowed to mingle among themselves and create their own systems. That is the crux of the matter. And therefore, once the international community begins to exploit the Middle East for their personal interests, we'll continue to have terrorism festering. But using a certain tool, an immutable tool in international politics, and that is religion. They could have used ethnicity. That will not work now. But to use that tool, hey, do you see they are destroying our Islam? Let's go for our own caliphate. And you get people to respond. Maybe if I were an Islamic scholar or that sort of thing, I could also even subscribe to this idea. Look, the American thinking, some scholars are writing, let us redraw the contours of the Middle East. That will not make any meaning. Why? Because the shared Sunni divide is being heavily exploited. Sunni minority in Bahrain, but America is supporting them to the hilt. Alawite Shiite minority ruling in Syria, that one is bad. Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, that one is good, so they are supporting. And when ISIS had not been fought, 3,000 Sunnis were allowed to cross the borders from Turkey to enter Syria. Everybody kept quiet. When the Russians were coming in, there is a problem. So until we have a modicum of, how do I call it, sanity and equity in the international system, we aren't going to get anywhere, especially so that when Russia says, I'm going in, he's going to fight all those who are anti-Assad, including the ISIS. But America says, no, those who are anti-Assad are pro-democracy forces, but ISIS is bad. How can we fight that? While finally the United Nations is also docile. I don't know, toothless. If the United Nations were very active after the Cold War, then I wouldn't have been seeing all these. When the United Nations Charter promises us that we're going to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, for them to live in larger freedom. Today, put the walls together, and the world has never seen this before.
Look, hold on for me 1 second. Let me come. This one, there was a message here that says, what's the guy in the studio saying? Yeah, what is your man saying about the West interfering into the caliphate when Muslims are killing each other in the name of people and those who are not, and those are not true Muslims, and basically complaining that Muslims have attacked more Muslims than anybody else. So in creating the state, they seem to be killing the same state that they. I mean, where does that argument fit into yours?
That's what Doc mentioned, that the Sunni Shiite divide, at some point Catholicism and Protestantism were daggers drawn against each other. So the Middle East has not been able to grow above such doctrinal differences in terms of the interpretation of the tenets of the religion. So therefore it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge if the West does not exploit, they'll be able to sort out. But Nana, religion, they say, is the opium of the masses. And people read the Quran, and the Quran says that for hukm al-jahiliyyati yabghun wa man ahsanu min Allahi hukman liqawmin yu'minun. Is it the legislation of the times of illiteracy they want, or it is the legislation of the divine. And so Islam has got everything from the fiscal system up to how to even treat energy. And so Nana, young people across the world that are quite impressionable. We are Ghanaians, we are living in Ghana and we are cool. But Middle Easterners have been Muslims for more than a millennium. So if they see the West interfere, either on the side of Saudi Arabia or Iran, and their heads they are in a collision course with each other, sometimes a fringe group like ISIS, when created, may win them over. So Nana, let's look at concrete. Nana, it's been 16 years. We still talk about battle for hearts and minds, carrots take approach, and they are just attacking, and we keep attacking them. So has the time not come for somebody to stamp his authority and say, let's do something substantive on the ground and see whether there will be a change? If not, we are in 2016. 2026, there could be attacks elsewhere. And you don't defeat these groups out of existence. They only lie low and come back later. So the ideology itself shows that the fundamentals are wrong. So I believe we can do better as an international community.
You know, can there be a revolution, or can there be a deliberate way in the way in which Islam are taught? Look, I've spoken to some Islam scholars, Mustafa Hamid, Sheikh Bagaya, I've spoken to you, and they make their religion, it's not that they make their religion, I mean, they show how beautiful the religion is. But you don't listen to some people and they make it totally ugly. I know it's everywhere. However, maybe because the media is not on the side of Islam, you know, then they pick on the uglier one and then blow it out of proportion. I mean, what is...
You saw Al Jazeera's editorial policy around 2003 and 2004. Al Jazeera, as a Qatari media house, which was only in Arabic, was anti-America. And so the reportage ran counter to the grain. But you know what happened in Baghdad, in Iraq? They bombed the bureau of Al Jazeera. And today we have Al Jazeera America. So you keep saying, until the lion learns to tell his tale, the tales of hunter always glorify the hunter. And so we've missed out on PR. I agree with you entirely. But if we present to Islam as pristine as it was revealed, just like Christianity as pristine as it was revealed, you realize these are divine heavenly religions, Abrahamic religions that are meant to solve all the problems of the world.
Doug?
Yes, Nana, yeah. I just have one small thing about that. Ibad is right when he talks about or supporting what I said about the Shiite Sunni divide, which is being exploited. I think we on this side make a mistake, which mistake is taken or brought to us by mainstream Western media, which churns out falsehood, making us believe that Islam is monolithic. That's wrong. Just like in Christianity today in Ghana, you have people preaching that come and buy some water when you write all your problems, whether it is money you want and that kind of thing, put it in that bottle and drink, and your problems will be solved. This is nowhere in the Bible, but people are doing it, and they get converts. They get people flocking to their churches. So even in Christianity, we are not that monolithic, just like Islam cannot be monolithic. But if we had allowed them to, you know, crystallize, they would find their own various systems and live in peace, because those of us who believe in the Bible, we measure every other thing outside with the Bible. So will Islam measure itself against the Quran, nothing else. Those very remnants, Shiites, Ahmadis, and Tijaniyas, and what would not mean anything, because whatever doctrine anybody is bringing would be measured against the authentic Quran, because Quran is one, just like the Bible is one. But we are not allowing that. And we are believing that Islam is monolithic, and therefore when ISIS says this, then it is in the Quran, and that's why people are there. That's very wrong. And it's mainstream Western media which is bringing this kind of hatred against the whole of Islam, which is very wrong. And that is why there is this asymmetric war, the nature of which we cannot predict.
Nana, Doc makes a very good point. And Nana, we have been coy about this point. Mostly we say terrorism is not an Islamic problem or it's not a Muslim phenomenon. Most actors that are called terrorists today are Muslims or they profess to be Muslims. So look into Islam for the solution. But when we sit around the UN Security Council, pass resolutions, decide whether Gaddafi should be bombed or someone else shouldn't be bombed, we are only creating the needed fodder for people to spread this hate that has cost everybody in the world. So for me, Nana, enough of the grammar. We've dilly-dallied, we've gone round this thing, we've meandered our way around it. What concrete thing can the international community do to make sure we solve this?
Well, this is for you. Nana, good evening. It's come about 10 times. If I don't ask you, I'm sure whoever sent it will kill me. He says, Nana, good evening. Please, I want to ask you guys why Islam is being forced on us. I don't understand why.
In Ghana, there is a condition in Islam before you stand up against the status quo. That you've not been fought in matters of religion. In Ghana, nobody has fought anybody because of their faith. So in Ghana, I don't think anybody foists Islam on anybody. But for areas where they have 99% of the population being Muslim, and someone else tells them how they should walk, how they should eat, how they should sleep, certainly there's going to be a blowback from them. So the rules are circumstantial and contextual. And in the case of Ghana, and the way Muslims and Christians are just living is just the best way. And nobody, not a single army came to this nation to foist Islam on anybody. Arab merchants and Muslim merchants from the sub-region that exuded sincerity were those that attracted our great-grandfathers to this religion. And so therefore, Nana, I am tired of talking about terrorism every now and then. And I believe if we give political Islam the chance to operate, maybe we'll see an end to this.
That's going to be my next question. This one, oops, hold on one second, let me catch this message. It says, good evening, Anna. What we need to do as a country to prevent terrorist attack is to avoid bringing religious differences in issues that has to do with terrorism. Let's pray against that and also prepare in case of any attack. This is Sadiq in Tamale. But assuming the world sat around and said, that's a beautiful idea, I'm going to buy a bad thing, let's create an Islamic state. What do we do? Do we join a few states together and say you have one caliphate, or everybody? How would this, what would be the modalities? Stay tuned, we're coming back. Let me take this message. Thank you very much for coming, for staying. And there was one that says that your guest is unfair and is always biased against Christians, you know. And I was trying to find out why is it that I'm biased against. Yes, I am a Christian, but I think I play.
You mean he meant the host?
Yeah, the host. The host.
No, you're not biased.
It says the host.
No, for me, let's look at this thing and look at it quite seriously. Yes, there are challenges. But I believe, left alone, people will be able to sort themselves out. You read about the Akans, the history of the Akans, the history of the Ekuyapims and others. Osei the first, how he died fighting. And ever since the war stopped, the world has seen the beauty of Akan culture. Ever since the last, lance fell to the ground, the world has seen the beauty of the life of various tribes.
Let me put this one in. And funny enough, you're all sending messages, beautiful messages, but you don't adding your name. This one says, Nana, we are missing a very important point here. There is an institution of Islamic Caliphate that existed peacefully over 106 years under one banner: love for all, hatred for none, similar to the Vatican. Ahmadiyya Muslims has established a model and an institution or world leadership back to back.
Nana, do you know what happened when Jerusalem fell to the Muslim army? That is, the Palestinian area was where Christ was born. The day the Byzantines, the eastern bloc of the Roman Empire, lost Jerusalem, some of the soldiers were saying, let's smash the church. They said, no, it's the house of God. Just change the direction where you face to pray. once the Prophet Muhammad, who is the leader of this religion, was seated in a mosque with his disciples, a Bedouin, an Arab villager, popped into the mosque and started urinating. Can you imagine someone rushing into a church or a mosque to urinate? So the disciples wanted to pounce on him. So the Prophet said, no, hang on. Let him finish urinating and then pour water to neutralize the stench of the urine. Then he called him later and said, you see, this place is a pure place where we should pray, and you can't desecrate it. So go unpunished. These are the things. And Christ did a lot more of these things. So if we put all of these beautiful things about religion, we've tried secularism. The main reason many young people are falling into the icy hands of such transnational terrorist organizations is that capitalism has not been a promising model to us. So everybody is yearning for an alternative. How many times have we discussed how democracy can be custom-made to suit African culture? There needs to be an alternative. And let's put all the cards on the table. But when you demonize a system, you demonize the traditional system, demonize other systems, and do not give them even a dog's chance to prove their veracity and efficacy, then it becomes very difficult. I'm sorry, Ivory Coast happened yesterday. If we continue to behave this way, it's going to happen again. So there needs to be something concrete to make sure we change what is happening on the ground.
Doc.
Yes, Nana.
Doctor, what could be a modalities if the UN was to sit down and say, look, you know what, let the Muslim have their own constitution, which is the Quran, and run their state as they please. Indeed, there are millions and millions and millions of worshippers who are happy to follow it without any pressure or anything. So why stop them? Let them go ahead.
The UN cannot, at this point in time, come out with something like this because the charter itself, the constitution of the UN itself, creates a conflictual kind of problem. It's state-centric, and once it is state-centric, then we're looking at not religions or groups, things like that. We're looking at state to state. And that is why it has become even more difficult to interfere in the activities of non-state actors like terrorist groups. So I thought what the UN should have done after the fall of communism, which was a kind of defining metaphor for state relations and individual relations, should have been allowing each state to grow in its own socio-historical and economic reality. But unfortunately, those who own, in inverted commas, those who own the UN did not allow that. What the UN should now do is to ensure that it takes up the mantle of going into those states with both diplomacy, Articles 36 to 51, or 39 to 51, using all those powers under its ambit and asking the big powers to help it rather to stabilize the world and then begin to think of what we can do with states and allow the states to live in their contradictions. Because if you take, say, Ghana, we have about 50 tribes and ethnic groups. What makes us together is our constitution and our understanding of our individual relationship, which we have called democracy, and which is not perfect, though moving. If we allow each state to do this, I do not think this suppression and when one is suppressed, look at Turkey, being supported to the hilt by the West. But I tell you, Turkey is suppressing the Kurds. The YPG is being bombed every day. PKK is not being allowed to grow. And yet there are countries that are supporting the current governance of Turkey. Then there are other people who are supporting Assad. You go to Saudi Arabia, another barrier country I would have called it. But then, so if the UN would now allow people to say that, look, whether we like it or not, every country is made up of a hodgepodge of states, a hodgepodge of ethnic groups. Allow them to identify themselves and live within your own constitution and not have the interference of, say, an American model and that kind of thing. That's the only way now. But to allow Muslims even to have a caliphate, yes, there used to be the period when the caliphate was I wouldn't say proper, but it's like if you begin to 1337 or I think Abad has the figures better. You know, they created their own caliphate. The Mongolian onslaught on the whole world. You know, Osman Danfodio brought the religion all the way to Nigeria, and which came to us also. Ibn Battuta and also of those slave raiders brought about Islam and things like that. Those who will accept it, accept it. Someone was saying that Islam was forced or not, or being forced. That's not true. I mean, those raids and whatnot created the condition for a caliphate kind of thing. And if you look at the map of those caliphates in the past, those were realities. Today, creating a caliphate will go against a simple reason. And therefore, I wouldn't say that it's correct for us to think of putting all Islamic people at one place and putting all Christians at one place. It doesn't work. Already, there is a thinking that we should put all Shiites in one corner, all Sunnis in one corner. And again, I say there are even derivatives within the Shiite movement and within the Sunni movement. Let each state grow on their own, and let our interstate relationship be based on democratic principles. You have your values, you live by it, I have my values. Once they don't offend me, we can't go to war.
Doc, thank you very, very much for that insight. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Doc,
very welcome.
Doc, sound sleepy. Today has been a busy day.
Yes, that's true, man.
Yeah.
This one says, Nana, you see, even in this discussion, how many listeners have seen any good point Ibad has said? That's how Islam suffers. Some people don't just want to hear that Islam can also bring about peaceful coexistence. This is Umar Said Bugamba. And he just tallies with one that says, you see, Islam has Ibad has an Islamic state agenda. And then the last one I want to read, it says, I admire Ibad's humility for apologizing to Nanado.
No, it's important because I'm a young man. I believe I can serve this nation for decades to come. And therefore, I need to be a consensus figure rather than a divisive one. And being attached to the NPP or the NDC or PPP or CPP is a wrong thing to do. There are times my analysis converges with what the NDC stands for. There are times my analysis converges with what the NPP stand for. But in this case, that 6-month timeline was wrong. It was based upon wrong intelligence, and a much higher authority gave me the info. Then I needed to apologize. I've said Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo as a prominent person, His Excellency the President, to me, are two sides of the same coin in their competence, sacrifice, and service to this nation. And on the 18th of April, Nana, I've already gone to the national youth organizers of some of the major political parties. We are going to have a national conference on youth policy in a peaceful 2016. When young people like us speak to us about the vision their parties have, they speak to our hearts. When the elderly folks do, then they speak to our minds. So that the youth leaders of each political party, youth leaders of all political parties, will present what their manifesto is to create jobs for the youth, how they support startups, how they support youth entrepreneurs, and then sign an accord to be committed to peace. And I'm happy to say Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, the chairman of the National Peace Council, has told me he's going to chair that conference. It's on the 18th of April. And so we hope to see you there.
Thank you very much. I'd love to be a part of that conference. But as I always remind you, the date is the 26th of March, where all roads will be leading to the one and only, now very famous pound, Edumasa, right in Akwem. We just drive towards Akosombo, drive towards the dam, just carry on, come to Edumasa and share in our joy. Otene Hokwa Fakutu, the third himself, is going to be there. And I'll be, as the week goes in, I will be running the itineraries past you. But that Saturday is going to be one beautiful family ride, beautiful day, full of color, full of culture, substance, and it's all going to be about Ghana. We're going to promote culture through education. Don't miss it. But thank you very much for watching, and tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Ibad, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Good.
Always a pleasure.